So as we just heard, the world's two largest economies are expected to extend their truce on tariffs, while the Trump administration is also planning to impose 100% tariffs on foreign-made semiconductors. For more on how this may affect Korean businesses and the economy, we're joined by Professor Kim Hwa-gyun, Professor of Banking and Finance at Texas A&M University Mays Business School. Professor Kim, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for the invite.
So the tariff truce between the U.S. and China was initially set to expire on Tuesday, but it's now been extended for another 90 days. How is this expected to impact the global economy?
So first of all, this pause was somewhat expected in that most of the media said it's not going to be done because obviously President Trump's style is, the negotiation style is in-person meeting. Usually that's when things are done. So it was rather expected, but still this pause actually gives some positive overall effects to at least the U.S. firms and consumers in that this very high tariffs is not going to affect their everyday consumption and the production. But in that sense, there's some different aspects of uncertainty growing because tomorrow morning, inflation data, CPI data is going to be released, and economists have been somewhat warning about the possibility of the surge in July inflation. So maybe market participants think this extension of pause as a guard against some higher inflation released tomorrow. So if that's the case, then maybe inflation is a concern and kind of overall snowballing can actually happen. So maybe people actually are worried a bit about this kind of angle as well.
I see. And eyes are now on whether Korean chip makers will be impacted by the Trump administration's new tariff on semiconductors. Will Samsung Electronics and SKhainicks be exempt from them as they're building plants in the United States? And what do the tariffs mean for the prices of electronic devices like smartphones and computers?
Yeah, so on the first question, I think, we don't know yet because Mr. Trump's actually comments are somewhat always pivotal and non-committal, but the Samsung and SKhainicks are likely to be exempt from this Trump administration proposed 100% tariff on semiconductors because obviously, as you mentioned, they have invested heavily in the U.S. and also committing to building a new factory for SKhainicks. So as long as this is not too narrowly defined in terms of the domestic production, I think both Samsung and SKhainicks are well prepared. So in that sense, I think it is fine. But we have to see what's going to happen in terms of the finalizing this deal. In terms of this meaning of the tariffs, obviously on our daily lives are completely depending on the electronics such as smartphone, TVs, and internet-based machines. So in that case, semiconductors are going to be extremely important. Therefore, the prices of consumers and also producers actually will eventually go up. So the most important effect is going to come through the inflation. So here's kind of the deal. So the smartphone prices or the TV prices or a car price is not going to go up instantly just because semiconductors go up in terms of price. But at some point when the new products are released, the firms will eventually adjust this price to increase. In that case, consumers, if they buy it at higher prices, then that means they have to have this burden of higher prices. If they decided to resist and not buying it, then I think firms have to absorb this. That means the recession is going to be more likely. Therefore, we will see the stagflation. So that's going to be the overall impacts actually of this huge tariffs on semiconductors because it's so important in our daily lives nowadays.
Right, and it was recently unveiled that Samsung Electronics will supply chips to Tesla and Apple from its new facility in Texas. What do you think drove these tech giants to select the Korean chip maker, and how might these deals help Samsung regain ground against its biggest competitor, TSMC?
Right. So obviously in case of this, the Apple, I think this is image sensor, and this was almost monopolistically produced and supplied by Sony, I think, in Japan. So from Apple's point of view, having more diversified suppliers, especially for this type of important parts, I think in terms of like earning the bargaining power, therefore they can lower the price, etc. Definitely just using Samsung into this ball game, I think it's going to be very important for their own perspective. At the same time, because of the tariffs, semiconductor part being exempt is going to be heavily dependent on the domestic production, and Samsung already has started and has this Taylor factory, I think. So this is going to be definitely helpful for Apple. For Samsung, obviously, like a perennial second place of this foundry business compared to TSMC. So clearly, it's a small step, but I think it's going to be a very important step for the Samsung to regain ground. For the same reason, Tesla's actually domestic sort of production in cooperation with Samsung is going to be very important, so that the Tesla can actually diversify its production scale, not just depending on or relying on TSMC.
I see. And it's not just for semiconductors, but Trump also said he'll initially impose a small tariff on pharmaceuticals, but said it could eventually reach up to 250%. How must Korean companies prepare for this measure?
Yeah, so I think this one's probably going to have like more step up, like increase in tariffs. So hopefully Korean companies actually have time to cope with this type of the tariff increases. I believe the big pharmaceutical companies like AstraZeneca or like these Roche, they do have like the U.S. facilities to produce. So I think hopefully the Korean pharmaceutical companies, SK Bio or like Samsung Bio, actually have room to do this. Of course, that's an eventual increase in cost, but to cope with this kind of things, having more diversified production facility is going to be a good deal. Another sort of important part is the Korean the medicine price is extremely cheap. So I think this can be used as some leverage from the U.S. side in terms of negotiating like increases in the medicine price in Korea actually using this. So that part I think we have to wait and see how this is going to play out in the future.
I see. All right, Professor Kim, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for your insight. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.